Welcome to the live stream, everyone that is joining me from the Time Crafting Trust Premium community, as well as those of you who are getting the opportunity to watch a kind of a raw version of the recording of the podcast, which you can subscribe to on our YouTube channel here, of course, which, you know, if you want to get the audio version, this is a great place to get it. This episode will be released in a few weeks' time from when this recording is taking place. So if you're a premium member and you've had a chance to watch this in advance, great. There will be people who can ask questions in my community. So if you've got some questions that you want to ask Carl as we make our way through the episode today, I'd love to hear them from you. They may even get chosen and broadcast on the podcast episode. And that's the crux of what we do. We do these live streams, I would say fairly regularly, probably about once per month. So that way people can, that way we can, you know, kind of have some interaction within the podcast episode other than between myself and the guest. So we're trying this new interesting thing. We've been doing it for a few months now, more regularly than we have in the past. We've had interviews with Francesco D'Alessio, Laura Mae Martin from Google, and many, many more. And you can expect more of this to come on the YouTube channel, and especially for those that are Time Crafting Trust Premium members. If you want to get more information about becoming a premium member, then you can check out the link in the description. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to bring in Carl Pullein here in just a second. Carl has written a new book. I'm going to put it up here now because once Carl's here, it's harder for me to do that and keep myself in frame. So it's called Your Time, Your Way. And yes, I am reading this on my iPad because it's an advanced galley that I was able to open on my iPad in the books. Time Well Managed, Time Well Lived. Fantastic book. I've got a series of questions already lined up. But again, if there are those of you that are watching the live stream right now, and there's several of you that are in here right now. I see Michael here from the community. If you are here from the community, go ahead and let us know that you're here. So that way, I can see any questions that you may have and address them. So without further ado, I'll take a quick sip of coffee because we're recording this at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And as a night owl, it's early for me to do something like this. So a minute into the live stream, here's what we're going to do. We are going to bring in Carl Pullein. Carl, thank you so much.
Hi, Mike.
Thanks for joining me
you again.
So we got Tim here as well. This is fantastic. And just so you know, Carl, the book, which we just started talking about, Michael's already bought the Kindle version. So he bought it today. So there you go. Janet is here as well from the community. I said I'm a night owl, so me doing this at 9 a.m., I had to, this is when I can do these at 9 a.m. when needed because I will match your energy and hype myself up a bit. But you're a night owl too. So that kind of puts us in what time is it where you're at right now as we're recording this?
It's 1 a.m. my time.
And you still
it's early in the morning.
You look like how I look at 1 a.m. when I'm like, I'd love to do that at 1 a.m. I mean, I think the rest of my family might have a problem with it, but so Carl, before we get started, there's always something before we get into the nitty gritty of the episode, just for those that are members of the community, the Time Crafting Trust community that are watching this now, or those that are watching the subsequent raw episode, I want to ask you a quick question before we dive in. So in the time, and we'll address this probably more deeply as we go through the audio version of the episode, but you've been in the productivity space for quite some time. What one thing has changed for you in the most obvious way from when you started to explore this realm to today as this book has been brought to the world? What's one thing that maybe a truth that you thought was a truth but isn't, like something along those lines? I'd love to hear that from you.
Well, there was a couple of laws that I've learned from actually writing this book, which I thought were just productivity tips, but they're actually laws. Is that every project will take longer than you anticipate. Because I thought this book would take me 12 to 18 months to do. It took 40. So way out on that expectation. Now, obviously, some projects that we have to do, we know because we've done that similar project before. But new projects, big projects, yep, they always take longer than you think. And the other thing that I've discovered, which I probably knew about because of books I've read in the past, is that if you want to actually complete these bigger projects, you've got to find the time and be consistent. Time is not something that will miraculously appear. You've got to find it and you've got to protect it. And being a night owl, that was actually quite good because I was writing the book between 11 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. I gave
Yeah.
myself 90 minutes, and it was a great time to write. I believe Tim Ferriss does that as well. Actually, he writes late at night. Certainly,
There's
when
a few.
when
There's
he was
quite
writing,
a few.
yeah,
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 Brandon Sanderson does a lot of his writing at night as well. He's a fiction author. There's a lot more night owls. There's a lot more of us out there that are doing things when all the rest of you are sleeping than But yeah, the boundary part is really important, and it's so funny. Before again, that guys like us, we know we tend to know these lessons, but it's funny sometimes. And you mentioned laws. We try to bend and or break them. But you can't. It doesn't matter how well you know how well you are versed in this space. It's like, nope, this is a universal truth. It's that immutable law. Like you cannot get away from it. All right, so we're gonna hit the record. We're gonna get started with our podcast episode recording. If you are here live and you have questions, and there's several of you here that are live in the community right now watching this video, throw your questions in the chat, and that way I can bring them to Carl's attention as we do so over the next, I guess we got about a half hour or so. But Carl, you have a job to do. You have to introduce yourself. So without further ado, and I'm gonna do this a little bit differently here. So I'm gonna record things. I've got my Rodecaster Pro all set up here, and I'll record the intro completely separately. So what you have to say is, hi, state your name, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. All right, I'll count you in. Ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Carl Pullein, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Carl, thank you so much for joining me for a productive conversation today. This has been a conversation that has been many, many years in the making. We've never really done a podcast recording before, have we?
No, we did. We did one about five
Not
or 6 years ago.
But on my show? Has it been on my show?
Yes.
Or was it on your show?
Yeah.
Wow, time flies. We will revert. So I need to put that in the show notes so that I can look back in that. But back when we did this, we did not have the book that you can see if you're watching this on YouTube right now behind you, or the one that I'm holding here on my iPad. And those that are watching this video live right now, members of my community, have already either have ordered because it's now out. Your Time, Your Way is the name of the book. Time Well Managed, Time Well Lived. Right out of the gate, I want to talk about something that you and I have in common when it comes to, there's many things that we have in common, but, the Ivy Lee method is something that I want to discuss. This idea of, I have this thing called the 6, this idea of choose your 6, and there's actually a program built around it. The idea of, the reason I look at this way is the hexagon. Like with the hexagon, you get 6 sides. It's the largest geometric shape that you can use in terms of area that has no spaces. Like you can get more inside of squares. You can do that, triangles, but the hexagon allows you, but it's six sides. 6 things. And the Ivy Lee method, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about it because you bring it up in the book and how this is, again, like when you look at like things like Arnold Bennett's How to Live on 24 Hours a Day, the Eisenhower matrix that's been around for years, even the Tickler file that David Allen has talked about that's been around before that. We talked about before we hit record for the audio version of the episode, these like immutable laws, these timeless truths. How do you, the Ivy Lee method, why aren't more people either looking at it or using it, or better still, satisfied by the idea that, okay, these are the 6 things that I've set aside to do? So let's explore the Ivy Lee method a little bit for those that are not familiar, and why it stands the test of time.
That can be quite deep. I think the biggest thing is that I just stepping back a little bit. One of the great things about digital task managers, if people are actually using digital task managers, is you actually have a way of seeing the truth, i.e., how much you are actually completing each day. Now, in my experience, most people are not even looking at it. Todoist has their karma points, for
Right.
example, which means you can actually go in there and see how many tasks you actually completed each day. And must be about 5 or 6 years ago now, I looked at mine and went, I'm actually only completing about 5 or 6 tasks a day. And I was thinking, I should be doing more. I should be doing more, because we think this way now. We have to do more, 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 more.
That's productive. The productive part is doing
Yes,
more, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. If I'm only doing 5 or 6 tasks a day, what would be my limit if I really, really had a good day? And I discovered that my limit was about 12 tasks a day.
Mm-hmm.
But so I brought it down to 2, brought it down by 2, and created what I like to call my 2+8. So it's the 2 must-do tasks each day, which I will in Todoist I flag in red. But I also, because I started experimenting with this back in February, and I'm still doing it, which is I write them down on my little A7 notebook. So those are my 2 today, both crossed off, job done. Because the other 6, or the other 8, I should say, is these are the tasks that really I should be working on, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if I didn't complete them. But those 2, they absolutely must be done. And I would say my success ratio over a 7-day period, I would say that's probably about 80%. So yeah, maybe what I should be doing is dropping it down to 8 plus 2.
Right.
And just seeing where I can be 100% consistent. But I'm happy with 70, 80% success rate each week, because as I say, those 8 are not must do's.
Right. Right. And what I think by adding that to the mix, and I mean, again, I like the idea of 6 in a nuanced 6. I think this is it's all nuance, right? Like when you're going through your book, when you're looking at this stuff, nuance plays such a huge role when it comes to productivity and managing one's relationship with time, because first off, there's a lot of external factors that come in. When someone hears the 8+2, or they hear the 6, or they hear, like, your top 10, people are going, only do 10, only do 6. There's no way. I do way more than that, or I can't. There's so many more things I'm given to do. But the nuance you've added of, like, okay, these, like, creating a relationship or some kind of identifier around them, and Todoist allows you to do it. So many, I mean, and again, like you said, bringing it to a pad or bringing it into the analog world, again, via a simple notebook, via those analog cards that Jeff Sheldon has made, anything like that, the bullet journal even. Bringing those in there allows you to kind of categorize them. And I think that's the key. When it comes to making decisions around this, that nuance plays a role. So you are a night owl. I'm a night owl. When, making decisions on the tasks that you should be doing at the end of the day, for tomorrow, right? Starting tomorrow, today. When do you do that? Because as a night owl, I mean, I can tell you, I map out the next day as the last task, even as so at 12:30 at night or 1 in the morning. That's when I'm doing it before. It's kind of like part of my evening. I call it my evening examination, like a bit of a riff on the Stoic element. Is that when you do it? And if not, or have you always played with that? And when should people actually consider doing that, based on?
Well, I think it's a good question, because I think that depends on one of the things I have with my coaching clients, for example, is a lot of them are waking up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I say, well, hey, that's when you do your planning, because there's no point in doing it. You want to be getting into bed because you're waking up so early.
Yeah,
I prefer to do it late at night. However, one of the things I do have is 9:30 to 11:30 every morning is blocked out for focused work. Now, because I do a lot of writing, Monday and Tuesday is writing. Tomorrow is really a calls day, but I will squeeze in a couple of hours of writing somewhere. But so I've got that block in the morning, and I do try to get that focus work done, because where I'm living is quiet, nobody's bothering me. My wife is usually out at that time, so she's not going to be asking questions, and my dog is also a night owl, so he's asleep. So I think I trained him well. So it means that I've got that 2 hours in the morning, and then I'm pretty flexible most of the day, and then around about 10, 11 p.m. I've got at least a 90-minute session where I'll do some more focused work. But the interesting thing there is, Mike, if you add that up, 3.5 hours of focused work a day. Now, I often get pushback from people saying, but you're a content creator, so you have more control over your day. I've got bosses and clients and customers say, whoa, 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 stop there. 3.5 hours a day, and I'm getting a lot done each week. If you just took 3 hours a day, that still leaves you with 5 hours
Yeah.
that you can be available for your colleagues, your customers, your clients, and whatever. I mean, it's not impossible, but you've got to be intentional about it.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And again, the idea of making sure that your intentions your intentions don't have to be just directly from you. They could have been something someone external gave you, and you get intentional about that. Like, I think that it can get conflated sometimes. Like, well, what do I want to do? Well, what you want to do sometimes, in fact, a lot of the time, is something, especially if you're employed, is something someone else gave you. You want to do that because it's part of your job, or you need to do that because it's part of your job. But I think you're like, a lot of people go into this, and this is where I want to talk about the time sectors, because a lot of people go into their days, their weeks, their months, their years without a framework in a lot of ways, because they feel, or a haphazard one, because they feel that, well, I don't have as much control. So if I don't have as much control over my day, to back to what your clients were saying, and I get the same thing too, is you're just giving that control away. Like, instead of just saying, all right, I'm going to take ownership of this, as much of it as I can, starting from that place, you start from a place of lacking, right? And that's problematic. When it comes to the time sectors, how does that help you in terms of having agency over your time and feeling like you have more command, more control over, the way that your days, your weeks, your months, and years even progress?
Well, this is because I still remember the day I was walking to the gym, and it just went, oh my God, yes, of course. It's not about projects in your task manager. It's about when. That's the most important thing, is when are you actually going to do it? And so I started experimenting with that. But what I realized most importantly is that most people, when they get a new task coming in, they automatically add it to the task list. It gets added a date, and they'll probably date it for tomorrow or the day after. And now you've got 150 tasks to do on Friday. I say, well, good luck with that, because you've also got 6 hours of meetings.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. And I started thinking, well, hang on a minute, what is my limit per week? And we've all got limits. Everybody has, whether you're like me, a content creator that has pretty much a lot of control over my time, but equally those people working in offices with bosses and clients and customers. What is your limit? And so I started defaulting to everything gets done next week. Because I have to point out that I am pretty strict about the weekly planning, or weekly review if you're GTD world. I know the value of that, and it's helped me so many times. I even do it on when I'm on vacation or holiday. I still do it. I would never miss that. But the thing is that once I realized I would say it's probably 70, 80, 90% of the stuff that gets thrown at me, certainly from Wednesday onwards, is going to be, doesn't have to be done this week. Right. But our natural instinct is, it's come from my boss, I've got to do it. And so I've also now said, when somebody says, oh, I really need this document as soon as possible, can you write it? And I'll go, yeah, sure, I'll get it to you early next week. I won't say specifically, because the worst thing that could happen is, no, we need it Friday. Okay, then I will then start looking at what I can do this week. But I'm not going to volunteer that. I'm going to suggest next week.
Yeah, it's like the over promising under you end up over promising and under delivering. You're flipping the script that way.
But the other benefit of this is that, and I can't remember, it was his former Israeli prime minister, I think it was Yitzhak Shamir. Now he was in the pre-digital age, so this was like early 80s or late 70s. But he said, the best productivity trick he ever learned was anything that comes in on his desk in the morning, he'll put it to one side and leave it for a week or 10 days. And then he'll come back to it. And what you'll find is 90% of it sorted itself out. And the 10% that didn't, that's what you need to do. Right. Now, today, I'm not sure you could leave stuff for 10 days. But the thing is that I like that idea that not everything that's going to come at you will ever have to be done, because that quick one, oh, could you quickly send me this file? And then you say, you pause, you wait a couple of hours before you reply, I say, sure, no problem. I'll get it to you by the end of the day. And they'll get a message say, it's okay, I've got it now. Phew,
Yeah.
no task I don't have to do.
Yeah.
So I've learned now is slow things down. So I default automatically to next week. Now, if it's involving somebody else, I will suggest next week. And if it's urgent, they will come back to me. But again, a high percentage of people will just say, that's fine, that's great, because they're under pressure too.
Yeah, we often, when we get stuff from people, we're not taking into account that they are just mainly capturing it to dump it off to you, right? Like it's their form of capture. Email is such a pervasive form of capture, but it's a delegation tool and a capture tool in one often when you get those emails. So something happens in a meeting, your boss then emails you saying, I need this done, and then they've forgotten about it. And they're not taking into account the 43 other things that they asked you to do. Not only that, you don't know what they've got on their plate either. So there's a lot of like mystery, right? And the point that you're making is your communication, when you communicate that, when you reflect back, like, yep, I'll get that to you early next week. If they come back to you with, well, no, I need it Monday, or I need like first thing Monday, or I need it like by the end of this week, you've created the conversation that creates parameters and expectations. So what you're doing is you're managing expectations, which is something that can be managed. You know, and I know this is going to sound, especially when we're talking about your time, your way. I've over the years lost the luster when it comes to the term time management. I know it's a sexy term. I know it's a term that people, well, it's not sexy, but I know it's a term people understand. But I think what we tried to do, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially after going through the process of putting together a pretty comprehensive book, which is basically everything that you've shared over the years, but with a deeper bent to it. I don't think you can manage time itself. Like, I really don't believe that you manage, because time moves on whether we want it to or not. I think what you're doing is you're managing your relationship with it. And when you realize that if you do that, then time will treat you well, as opposed to the other way around. Whereas if you don't manage your relationship, it's like any relationship, right? It's like a relationship with a partner or a colleague or what have you. And that means when you do that, then you will set up devices, set up ways to make sure that that relationship stays strong. Do you think that, especially as you were putting the book together and over your years work on this, like the idea of we're doing things in a way that doesn't serve being productive in a sustainable way, like, is that something that has emerged for you as well? And if so, or either way, I'd love to have that discussion, because when we hear the term, like trusting your calendar, balancing, like all these things, it can be overwhelming. But if we start to reframe things, which you do in this book and you do with a lot of the stuff that you share, it can make things just better for you. You get to have your way. What are some of the things that you can share in terms of like your idea around, hey, maybe we're trying to manage the wrong thing. Maybe we by doing this, we end up getting the same result, but in a way that actually feels more natural or even more human.
Well, I think the thing that I remember hearing that you can't manage time first, I think it was from David Allen or from Getting Things Done book. I don't know if he actually mentioned it in the book, but certainly I've heard him say it.
Yeah.
And I just accepted it. And then I started thinking, well, hang on a minute, because I used to teach English. So it was great when you used to teach the verbs, the the nouns, money and time, because they share the same verbs. And I said, well, hang on, if we get our salary, let's say we get $5,000 a month, and we've got to pay our rent or mortgage, we've got to pay our gas bill, electric bill. So what we're doing is we're allocating parts of our salary to different things that we are committed to paying. I thought, well, this is the same with time. And it's like, well, we talk about managing money. Well, that's managing money. And this is probably why we say we're managing time. But what I realized is, and this is the whole thing for me about the time set system and how it's grown, was that, wait a minute, I don't know how many hours, let's just say I allocate 1 hour a day for dealing with communications. Now, this is the actionable stuff. Now, I don't often need that full hour. but I still have it in my calendar because I know if I don't, what's going to happen is if I skip it one day, I'm going to have double the amount to do tomorrow. Skip it another day, it's a triple amount. Equally, I've got the same with admin. I have an hour for admin, but it usually only takes me about 20, 30 minutes a day. But I don't like spending 3 hours on Saturday morning doing admin. I mean, that would just destroy my Saturday. So I'm just doing 20 minutes a day. I've got an hour because my accountant has a bad habit of sending, can you send me the VAT research? It's urgent. I need it tomorrow. I think, thanks, Claire.
Yeah.
Please give me a bit more notice. But it's okay because I've got an hour and I can do it over a couple of days. Sure, I can do it. So I think you're right in the sense is time is fixed. It's the only asset that we have that is fixed, but that's great because now we've got something solid. We've got 24 hours. What we don't have, and this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to push people away from task-based productivity back towards what I would describe as time-based productivity, which say, okay, this is the time that I've got each day. I need an hour for communications. I need an hour for admin. Maybe not, maybe 30 minutes. But I like to have 2 hours for doing focused work. How much does that leave me left? Another one that I saw recently, I can't remember who said this, but I think it's a genius idea, is if you've got meetings overload, you've got too many meetings, set a limit on the number of internal meetings you have each week. So if you say, okay, 15 hours a week, I will allow for internal meetings, which I think is a bit too much, but most people say, no, that's okay.
Yeah.
But that means that once you get another meeting, a 1 hour meeting, that's an additional hour in that week, and it takes you to 16, you say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It'll have to be next week. And again, we go back to that thing where people say, oh, phew, that's another meeting I don't have to do this week as well. And it gets pushed off to next week. So I think what we need to get is back to that, because I know that Jim Rohn and Hiram Smith and people in the 70s and 80s who were writing about time management, they were trying to keep us back on that time-based stuff. And then it's kind of drifted away. And I don't know if it's partly GTD's fault because that put a lot more focus on context and tasks and stuff. I don't know why it happened, but somehow we've got now, we've got all this task to do. How can I do more?
Yeah.
No. It's more about you can do more if you want, but you're going to have to sacrifice some of the other activities that you want time for if you want to do more. Now, for me and my wife, I mean, I protect Tuesday afternoons and Saturday nights. That's our family time.
Sure.
And the great thing about that is our calendars are aligned. And, Monday night's conversation is always the same. Where do you want to go tomorrow? Because we usually go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And Saturday nights would be like, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? That sort of thing. But it's now fixed. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to try and... I've seen people in their task manager schedule date night. I was going, why not just fix it? I mean, it might not be possible to fix it, but, if you can, just fix it. I think the Beckhams do that. Wednesday night, I always heard that David and Victoria Beckham, it's Wednesday night is date night.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think what happened... And it's hard to break. This is actually a really interesting way to kind of, we're going to geek out about it because we're both productivity nerds. But the idea of, I think what happened was, I think GTD had a bit to do with it because just the deluge of tasks. And I think a lot of it had to do with people misinterpreting what a task was versus what a project was, right? And that still happens, right? I mean, we talked about this before we hit record, the idea of working on a book. Oh, it's going to take this long. Therefore, and then it ends up you didn't break it down enough. And all of a sudden it takes more time because there's, again, nuance, right? So, but I also think that by shifting it that way, it was like, okay, we know that time is fixed. Tasks are not. You're going to get a ton of them from multiple sources. So that's the thing you have to manage. I think what we're in an era of now, and we're seeing with again, Cal Newport's new book, Slow Productivity, and we're seeing, the second brain stuff, is we're seeing, and Cal did an excellent episode on his podcast about like the history, like the love-hate relationship with productivity. I don't know if you listened to it. I'll put it in the show notes because it's really good. He walks through like the Tim Ferriss's era, and then the minimalism, and then the GTD, like all of that stuff. I think we're in a coalescence of people are realizing that we can't do all that stuff. Like we just can't, right? And so Well, instead of doing more, it's about doing right. And that's where the calendar comes in, because I think, and you talk about like trusting your calendar, but you also use Todoist, right? So the thing is, a lot of people, they'll be like, well, I have everything in my calendar. I'm going to use time blocking exclusively and put on my calendar. I'm like, yeah, but what do you do during those time blocks? Well, like you said, focused work. Okay, what's focused work, right? So then you want to remove as much friction from that as possible. Conversely, if you're not putting anything in your calendar, right? So if you go with the pure David Allen of, and I mean, again, there's nuance there, because you and I've had conversations. You've had conversations with David over the years, right? I know.
Yes,
Yeah. So David will say like, basically anything on a calendar is a commitment. So you could put all your appointments go there. You could argue that appointments with yourself would be focused work. So therefore it's an appointment. You could do that, right? And he's pointed that out. But a lot of people don't look at it that way. They go, all my appointments are with everybody else. They don't think about making appointments for themselves or with themselves. So the thing is that they leave their calendar blank other than those appointments, which, number one, allows people to fill it up with meetings if they want to fill them up with meetings, especially if they've. Secondly, what it does is when you look at your calendar, and I'm looking off to the side to my wall calendar, you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Right? Like, and my to-do list will tell me, oh my goodness, let's look at, and Todoist is so great because it's got a lot of power under the hood, but it's got a clean interface, right? But the problem is most people still do habitually look at the Today View, right? And the Today View could have 43 things on it. And then they're like, well, how do I do them? When do I do them? So we're in this meshing, I think, and it's hard because we're getting used to the meshing of, okay, let's look at the calendar. Like, for example, I'll use my example of time. Today we're recording this on Wednesday. Wednesday's daily theme is podcast. Great. I've already narrowed my focus down to the podcast. Now, you and I are having a conversation right now that falls outside of that purview. But once you and I are done, my brain goes, well, now what do I do? Well, it's podcast day. So I start with my calendar and then I look at my to-do list and it indicates what tasks fall into that. And that gets my overarching focus. People like absolutes, though. So they're like, so you only do podcast stuff on Wednesday? I'm like, no. It gets my overarching focus. So it becomes this, it's the nuance that's hard. And the world is losing its nuance in so many areas, right? Like there's so much. And I think if you have a strong framing and if you try, the trust part is huge. So I want to circle back to trusting your calendar, because you do like over your task manager, and you touched on it a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the idea, like, I think that's the approach. And you also brought the paper into the mix as well. So the paper further refines it, right? Like, okay, Todoist is telling me 43 things. What are the 2? What are the 6? What are the 8 plus 2? So for somebody who's having a hard time knowing how to use their calendar in a way that allows them to, have their time their way, what are some of the things that you've done and that you suggest that they do inside the book? And even outside of the book, because you've got lots of YouTube videos, which we will share, the YouTube channel link, of course. What are some of those things that will allow you to establish trust? Because without trust, you're just going to float back to those old ways which aren't serving you.
So I mentioned, so I've got a 1 hour block in my calendar for communication time. Now, normally that's before dinner. Right now in the summer, so I take the dog for a walk after dinner. So I've moved a few things to the afternoon. But what it means is it's communication time. My calendar's telling me it's communication time.
Yep.
I then go to Todoist and I've got a label for communications. So all the things that are, the filter I'm using here would be all the things that are due today for the communications. But I've just got it all in one view. So I can say, communications.
Yeah.
So I might have a list
you've sorted it too. So the thing is, if you've got that, you've got that label, you could sort it by priority, whatever. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So Todoist sorts it for me. They just say, today, these are the things that you've indicated need to be done that's related to communications. Equally, it's like one of the key factors that I mentioned in the book as well is like understanding what is your core work. Like, what is the work that you're employed to do, that you're paid to do, whatever it is. Now, for me as a content creator, that's writing, creating videos, doing my podcast and stuff like that. So I have like audio, visual, writing, and those actually cover pretty much everything I do. So now when I see on my block on a Monday morning, I actually have it as writing time on Monday morning because that's what I do. And again, I can just go to Todoist and it's got the list. Oh, write blog post, write first draft of blog post, write newsletter, whatever it might be. So
Right.
my brain doesn't have to overthink this. All I need to know is, oh, my calendar says tomorrow is, like for me, Wednesday's audio visual day. So this morning I did my YouTube video. Actually, it's probably stolen it completely from you. It's
No, but
weird. I'm thinking as I'm speaking, I'm thinking about this because when I first started doing this, I just said, oh, a time block it's like, okay, it's audio visual time. But because now I've been doing it for so long and I just naturally have gravitated to doing it on the same day. So Mondays, I always write. Wednesdays, I always do my audio
Yep.
visual days. And so now I'm starting to do a mic and say, oh, it's audio visual day today.
Well,
It's not,
you know what?
not intentionally, but that's what's happened.
No, but here's the thing, and I think this is important and to share with everybody watching this is nothing is really new. Like the tickler file that David Allen talked about was like from the 1800s. Like all he's done is brought it into the fold of getting things done into the modern world. The Ivy Lee method is the Eisenhower matrix was called the Covey matrix because Covey popularized it, but it was Eisenhower that. So Arnold Bennett, How to Live on 20. If you want to read, and I've shared this before. Cal introduced me to this book years ago. If you want to read a book that it's short. It's called How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. I think you've read it, right, Carl? So
I think I have. I've read so many books.
But it's a really short read. But if you read it and then you try to transplant, like it's very easy to transplant a lot of it, not all of it, to today, right? And go, so 110 years ago when Arnold Bennett wrote this book, and he was essentially the Stephen Pressfield of his time. He was writing a lot of fiction, and then he wrote a piece for, I think it was the London Free Press, like a series of pamphlets that was like how to live on 24 hours a day. And his idea was, look, the day isn't just the work day. Like it's like, so you should be managing all that time. And instead of sitting on the train and reading the paper and doing all this stuff, like you could be reading a book, you could be doing something, quote, more productive. But and just some of the things, I'm like, well, this has been replaced by social media. And you can do this easier now because of that. Nothing is really, I mean, John Lee Dumas themes his days. I don't know. I mean, it's not like this is proprietary to a point. It's the amalgam that is, right? Like the time sector system, like all that stuff, it's your voice. I think that's the key too, right? It's the voice of the person that they can relate to, which gets me to my next question, because this is more of a precise question. I have members of my community, and I also know some people who, you mentioned you were a professor, right? Like you were a teacher. Balancing like that kind of scope, because you're dealing with, you have to be at a place at a certain time. So this applies beyond obviously teaching, because you have to be in class teaching at a certain time. And I know when I give a lecture or a talk, that's energy. Like that's, by the time I'm done that, I want to take a breather, right? But you've got like balancing the teaching part, balancing the administrative tasks, personal projects. I know for a fact that there's one person that's in the stream right now that could probably use your advice on like, how do you do all this stuff and then do the things that, like you said, that matter the most. How did you make that work, and how do you continue to make it work today?
Well, actually, okay, when I was working in the university, that was an interesting one because they gave me the schedule. So that was easy. I mean, I got a semester's worth of schedule, so it was great. I can block all the teaching time in my calendar and say, right, I need to be here at 9:30 at that time for a 3-hour lecture. I'm going to break this up because I don't like to stand on my feet for 3 hours. So I think we did like 90-minute break. We did 90 minutes and then we had a 15-minute break and then we did a finish off. But it was, I loved that. I mean, that's some of the things I really loved about teaching, is because I actually was given a schedule, and then I can work around that. So, but I think Cal Newport talks about this, is teaching life is very seasonal anyway. And it was for me when I was working in the university. So, I can't remember the exact times. I probably like say 12 weeks was a semester. I think it was something like that. So I knew for 12 weeks, I'd be teaching every Tuesday and Thursday, 9:30 in the morning. And it was really, I needed to be on site for student meetings on at least 2 afternoons. So, again, I think I did that Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. because I thought, well, let's just do it the whole day. And yeah, it was just a matter of, again, it goes back to that calendar. I could never have done this on the task manager. The task
No.
manager is just a support vessel. It says, these are all the things that you should be doing or needs something doing to it, but this is the time when you're going to do it. And I'm calendar led, I guess.
Well, but here's the thing. I think it's, to use a metaphor, it's the calendar is the bucket. The tasks are water. If you don't have a vessel to put those tasks in, it's going to go, because it doesn't stop, right? Because I mean, people will, and I know when you work with clients, I'm sure that, I mean, they're like, how do I do all this stuff? How do I, I'm not, and there will be these little cracks that appear. This is the journey that I see. And this is the journey that we all go through. And I'd love to hear whether this echoes for you as well, is you start using the framework, any framework. You take it on. Hopefully you take it on in piece by piece, that's a great thing about what you put in this book, is it's like, it's not a do all this now and then, because that's overwhelming too. You add it bit by bit, right? Like you figure it out until one takes hold, and then you add another one, right? And then, or maybe two, maybe you get more confident. But then once it's going and you're like, okay, things are running really well. And then all of a sudden you hit a bump in the road, right? And that bump in the road is what you got to watch out for, because then all of a sudden it's like, well, this person, like, they have been getting this thing done and I've been waiting on it. I'm like, well, so my example I'll give you for a client would be, well, don't use waiting as a way to label it. Use follow-up. That way it's active instead of passive. So you are pursuing them because you're their boss, as opposed to the other way around. So there will always be these things. And eventually I've had to say to a client and to myself and to everybody in the world, you're not going to get it all done. Like, if you know that, but it's true. You're not, like, there are going to be so many things that come into this head that come towards you, like, and you're not going to, if you can go in kind of like with this freeing element of, like, there is freedom to that, knowing your limits, as soon as you recognize that, then you can do something with it. So as soon as you acknowledge that, and that's hard, because humans want to achieve. We're like that prefrontal cortex part of our brain wants to thrive, not just survive. And the tipping point between, that's why I don't mind people putting in their to-do list, schedule date night. Now, I don't think that they should schedule a date night every week. I think that they should have a task that tells them, hey, in the hustle and bustle and speed of the world, you want to have a date night? Put that in to-do list, or put that where you're going to do it, and then schedule that date night. But don't say schedule a date night. Schedule recurrences of date night, or talk to partner about, and make it so it's got meaning behind it. Because what will happen. If you put scheduled date night every week recurring in Todoist, you're going to skip it 1 week. And then maybe you won't skip it 2 more weeks, but then you'll skip it 2 weeks in a row. And then all of a sudden, or by the time you do it, it's like, well, this week's full. Okay, well, we'll postpone and postpone and postpone. And then all of a sudden, well, when did we have a date last? Oh, it was Christmas, right? Like, you know what I mean? So I think
it's interesting, that one.
Yeah.
Because you've actually made me realize something there, is that one of the problems that people have when they're using task managers is they see that list of tasks that they have to do today and they believe it has to be done today. But I am totally in love with what I call strategic rescheduling. And that means that when I wake up in the morning, like tomorrow morning, I know I'm not going to quite get the sleep I probably need. So I know that tomorrow I'm going to be rescheduling.
Sorry. Actually, I said sorry. I'm Canadian. I got to say it the right way. Sorry, Carl. I know I kept.
But the thing is that I call this strategic rescheduling. It's like, First of all, I got to know. I mean, on a good day, I can pretty much recognize when I'm on a good day, and I'm going to probably get all the tasks done. But by lunchtime on any given day, I can tell you whether I'll be able to be completing everything or not. And then I'll just go into. Now, I don't usually start clearing tasks out at lunchtime. I wait till the end of the day, and then I just say, okay, those didn't get done. Okay, I'll reschedule them for another day. I'm really comfortable with that. But when I first started doing that, I thought I failed. I didn't do my task today. I was thinking, hang on a minute, my life isn't tasked, not doing tasks. My life is about, doing what I want to do. I mean, including work, because I enjoy doing what I'm doing, doing what I'm meant to do, doing what I want to do. And if I get those things done each day, that's a success. That's a result. Rescheduling 5 or 6 tasks, I don't have a problem with that. But I
No.
do I had to reframe it as a strategic rescheduling because now I don't feel guilty about it. It was, okay, I was tired today. I knew I wasn't going to get to them and it was right. So I didn't. And
Right.
that's
And
okay.
well, and that's the thing is that you've got to reframe it that it's not procrastination. It again, patterns help. Do you keep a journal, Carl? Do you, I don't know. I don't remember if you do. Yeah, yeah. How important is that to you?
Oh, it's critical. Every morning, I can't start the day without writing something in there. Over the years, it's got more than just. When I first started, it was like, weather's nice today. I did this yesterday because it's a bit. When you start a journal, it's a bit like when you meet somebody new. You're a little bit scared of opening
Ooh,
up,
I
but the
like
more
that.
you meet them, the more you open up. And I've been writing a journal for about 7 or 8 years now, and I'll write anything in there. Whatever I'm feeling, I'm going to write, and for me, it's just a fantastic way to start the day.
Yeah, and what that does is it allows for periods of reflection. So let's say your strategic planning keeps happening with this one task again and again and again and again. Is it now strategic planning or is it procrastination? And then the journal for me allows me to dig into that a little bit more. Like that's what that practice does for me because it
Well,
cultivates
actually, for
awareness.
me,
Yeah,
that one
that's
that gets triggered on a Saturday morning when I do my weekly planning.
review, right?
I see that task and I'm going, okay, that was there on Monday. It's still here on Saturday. What was the problem? I'm not beating myself up about it.
No,
I'm going, okay, there's one of two things that have happened here. I've written it in a bad way, so I'm just procrastinating. But it's because of the way I wrote it, or it's too big and it needs breaking down.
right.
And but that would be my trigger. I would see it on Saturday and say, okay, why did that not happen? Now it could be that it also meant that I needed to be involved with somebody else and they've been very slow. Okay, that's a genuine excuse, and I can then reframe it and come at it a different way on Monday. But no, my trigger will be on Saturday. Is like I say, okay, I've rescheduled this 5 times. What was the problem?
Right, right. I'm going to put in the show notes the link to a post I have about the effing meeting, which relates back to the date thing. And I call it the effing meeting because it's food, finance, family, and fun. My wife and I do that every Sunday. And then that allows us, this goes back to the date night thing, that allows us to, when we have a date night, to not talk about anything, but just enjoy the date. So Sundays we do our budgeting, we do all that stuff, and we don't do it in a particular order. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. The only reason I bring this up is that Michael in the chat says that he has a date night every Wednesday. And, if it has to be rescheduled, it has to be within the week. So there's some rules around that. There's some parameters around it. And we're so, what? And I'm going to let you go soon because I know we're close to, we're pretty much at time. But I want to get into some of the mistakes because, there have been some mistakes I've made along the way. I'm sure you have too. I mean, we all make mistakes in our productivity journey. But one mistake I see is the misinterpretation that having any sort of framework going into this and not adopting it's almost stifling. I think Cal also had an episode not too long ago where he talked about like is time blocking oppressive. I didn't listen to the episode yet because it just came out, but it got me thinking, like, do some people, I think of it when people think about it as oppressive, it's not for those on the other side of it. If I send you a calendar link, which I did actually, you're not going to go, well, look at all the time Mike took. Like, you're going to go, where are the open spots? You're not looking at what's not available. You're looking at what's available, right? So you don't care what my time block is in this scenario. But I wonder if the oppressiveness might come internal. Like, who am I to do that? Number one. So there's a confidence factor. Like, I can't do that because if I do that, then people will be upset. The second thing is it seems too rigid, too restrictive. I was on a podcast interview with Joey from Baron Fig a number of years ago, and he said, your system sounds really rigid and really like there's not a lot of flexibility. I'm like, actually, there's a ton of flexibility. I go, I've just, because anyone can apply it differently. But if you don't apply it and you go, well, I like to have a bit more, I like to have more flexibility. So I'm not going to put anything on my calendar. So I have all that flexibility. And then they wonder, well, where'd my day go? Right. So that's a mistake. But what are some of the mistakes that you've made?
Well,
or maybe
you mentioned, good one you mentioned. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mention like the time blocking.
Yeah.
Time blocking works. However, as usual, there are people out there who will take it to the extreme. And I've seen like people say, I block out 50, I think it was Elon Musk's 5-minute segments or 15-minute segments or 30-minute. And I'm thinking, well, okay, now you've just ruined it for everybody because those are the videos that are going to get attention, or those are the blog posts that get attention. Or time blocking is too restrictive. I've got, 4 hours a day, definitely, which is blocked for doing specific work. Out of 24.
Yeah, it's the percentage of time is so small. Like, that's the thing is people are like, it's when people say, I can't journal every day. And I'm like, it takes, like, there's a product called the 5-minute journal. It's literally a thing you can buy. And it's like, well, I don't have 5 minutes. Or I don't, like, the value and all that stuff, because it's resistance. And a lot of it has to do with what the great analogy you brought up with was like, it's opening up. It's like, I don't want to go on it. I don't want to date myself in this fashion, right? Like, I don't want to build that relationship. But the thing is, my argument is, you say you don't have 5 minutes a day. How much time are you spending on social media? Well, if you are posting to social media, you are journaling for the world. I would argue that spending 5 minutes to journal for yourself is far more valuable and actually might make your social media post. Like, I'll give you a great example really quickly. Actually, and you heard this before we hit record. We had a plumbing issue, a leak. It's going to be an insurance claim, all that stuff. I don't want to get into too many details, but it threw everything off. I can't tell you how many times people post like, this bad thing happened to me on social media. This bad thing happened. And I get it. You know, you want to know that you're not alone. I totally get that. But I'm also like, this is something for me. I shared it with a couple of friends and they're like, oh, wow. But I didn't need that putting it on social and going, look at what happened to me. Woe is me kind of thing. But you know where it did go? In reflection in my journal, the photo is of the ceiling being ripped apart and me going, this sucks. Man, look at and it's only Tuesday and look at the week. So that is cathartic for me. Whereas, and I think a lot of people use social media can be used for cathartic reasons to make them feel better. But if you took that and applied it, then that doesn't go on your social feed, which means, number one, you're not going to get ads for plumbers and drywall repairmen on your Facebook feed.
Yeah, that's none of that, yeah.
Right? But number two, and again, I'm not saying this is an absolute, because I will do it from time. Nothing's absolute. But I mean, the thing is that when I'm looking at it, I'm going, now when I share something on social, so I did share something, and it was like, I think it was a quote from Steinbeck saying, life, to live is to have scars. And I posted that. And I'm like, yep, this is life. And that was related to what had happened to me. But if someone goes, are you okay? Like, so it's just fascinating to me that, and again, it's a habit. It's a routine. It's hard I'm going to spend some time doing that.
Yeah, the morning routines for me was, I think I read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma many, many years ago now. And that was what sparked my thought, it actually sounds like a good idea, but waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning, not a good idea for me.
Yeah, so, there's lessons there, yes.
Once again, though, I actually went, but Robin's onto something here. He is actually onto something, a solid morning routine. And I thought, but it doesn't have to be at 5 a.m. in the morning. It can be, I wake up at generally 8:30 on a normal day. So that first 45 minutes is my time. I see it as my time. And I make my coffee, I write my journal, I clear my email inbox, and then my day starts. And the only reason I clear my email inbox, because everyone says, oh, you shouldn't do email first thing in the morning. I need to know what's happening in the day, because if I don't know, my brain is going to be going, something's in there, something's in there. And that is a bigger distraction than not knowing. So I'd rather know, and then I will, if it's an emergency, I will deal with it. But 9 times out of 10, no, afternoon when I do my actionable email.
And that's a system. That's it. Like, there are so many processes that we put in place. And by the way, Michael Porter in the chat is saying that he likes your system and he's seen it in a few of your videos. So he likes, obviously he's enjoying what you're putting out there. I mean, the silver button behind you clearly shows that people like what you're putting out there too. But this idea of, you're right. It's like, there is no one way to do this. Number one, I mean, when we had Hal Elrod on. Hal Elrod's up really early, and one of the questions I asked him, we'll link to that episode in the show notes as well, was, he's got teenagers now. Well, teenagers aren't miracle morning people. Like, they're just not. They're like us. They're night owl. They may revert back to it, but during that phase of their life, which is why it's terrible that it's so bizarre to me that as they go into high school, they have to get to school earlier rather than later, right? Like, during the high school years, school should start later. It could go later, but it shouldn't start at 8 a.m. because you're basically got a school full of zombies in a lot of ways. But it's the resistance to processes, because processes don't feel initially like they are being productive when you start using them, like anything else, but they can take on the aura of optimization instead of actually doing stuff. But the thing go ahead.
The thing I should go on there. One of the things that the book I read last year, which is written, I've forgotten the title of the book, but it's by one of the Formula One technical directors for Ferrari, for Ross Brawn, and it's just a brilliant book because he talks about the mechanics of racing cars, but he talks about the kind of the background. We see the races on the track, but like, these days, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, etc., they're changing 4 tires in 1.8 seconds. 1.8 seconds. Now, how do you think they got that speed? Because if you and I and several other people got together, we could probably take us 10 minutes to do it. But how have they got it down to like 1.8 seconds? It's because they've analyzed the process and they've done it over and over and over and over again, and now it's super fast. I can process 150 emails in less than 20 minutes. No problem at all, because I do it every day. I've refined. I also know where people ask questions. They never ask the question in the first paragraph. It's always the second or third, or perhaps the fifth or the sixth. So I'm quickly looking. I'm now even getting to the point where I'm just looking for question marks, actionable. If there's a question mark, it's actionable. Because that's all about speed.
Yes.
And there's certain things in productivity which is about speed. Clearing that inbox is speed. But responding to the email later, that's about slow down, because if you apply speed there, your communication is going to be unclear, and that will then mean that they will come back to you asking for clarification, and now you're just making more email for yourself. Yep. So I realize if I spend an extra minute writing an email, just going a little bit slower, I can be clearer in my communication, so nobody's coming back to me asking for clarification, which reduces my inbox. And so there's like these little, you mentioned about nuance. I mean, these are all little nuances, but you don't get there on day one. No. You get there if you practice it consistently over and over and over again. And to me, that's part of the excitement of it all. Is like, okay, I've got it down to 150 emails in less than 20 minutes. Can I get it in under 15 minutes? And now I'm making email exciting, which is weird, because how do we put that in the same sentence? Exciting and email. but
well, when you do
that's
that,
my way of thinking about this now.
No, but when you do that, what I believe happens is it's, again, the practice of the process serves both quantitative and qualitative productivity in that case, right? And the problem when you don't have a process is that you really only can make any kind of inroads with quantitative productivity. But the problem is, without any quality, you're just checking off boxes, right? And then that in and of itself means that, the quality of your work can suffer. And in some instances, like you said, if you're processing your email inbox, which is, again, number one, there's some processes that are out there, inbox zero, which has been kind of redefined, I would say corrupted over the years since Merlin Mann introduced the idea of it. But if you approach it with, this is the process I'm going to have, oh, I noticed this, because you're practicing it again and again, the speed comes, right? Like what does they say? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? But the thing is that if you don't have any kind of process that you've practiced and got better at and better at and refined and all that stuff, then the quality will never get there, right? And what you want to do is get good and then get fast. Not get fast and then try to get good. I was watching, actually, I talked about this in a workshop I did for my community the other day. And George Harrison, who's my favorite Beatle and one of my favorite musicians, in an interview, his last album he did was called Brainwashed. And there was an interview I saw on YouTube, I'll link to it, It was a very short clip where he said it feels like everyone is running around. The world has everybody running around, but when you're running around, you can't see things clearly because everything's like a blur. And he alludes to some of that. And again, I'm paraphrasing. But the problem is if you start running and you don't know where you're going and you have never been there before, then you're not even going to get clarity because everything is blurring by you, right? So how do you do that? Well, you slow down a little bit and then you pick up the pace as you get. And then if you run the same route again and again and again, then you can get faster. But we try to put the cart before the horse, or we try to replace the cart with something that it shouldn't be, like, or we try to replace the horse with something. And it's like, no, look, just get the process dialed in, practice the process, like with journaling, like with meditation. There's no real wrong way to do it, and you'll get better at it over time. So, Carl,
I think the fun part, I should say, is actually once you've got the process established, as I say, you're not going to get good at it immediately, but then you can start doing that, as I say, the fun bit, which is refining sections of that process. And I love that part. Yeah. I write feedback after every coaching call. And I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I was thinking, why am I creating this template? Every time I do it, I keep the same template. Why not just create a template, save it in Pages, and then all I have to do is click on it and it opens up my templates there. It'll save me time. It does. It saves me a lot of time. But now I'm getting to the point of, how can I refine this? That was like 2 or 3 years ago. I'm thinking, I could probably get faster at this. And I'm not doing this every day, but at the end of every quarter, I take a week. I just have a blank calendar for a week and I can do whatever I like. And it's in that time when I usually start thinking about my processes and think, okay, maybe I've been doing this for a long time now. Is there a way I can speed it up? And that little speed gives it an edge, but it also means that I feel that sense of continuous, never-ending improvement, which is a Tony Robbins thing. Yeah. And I've always loved that phrase because it is. I'm looking at everything going, how can I improve this? How can I improve this? The way I work. And what I'm finding is at the back end of this, it's freeing up so much more time so I can take more naps, which I love.
So do I, man. We'll have to revisit the night owl stuff again in a future conversation. One that I will. I mean, now that it'll be like the third time, it'll be the trilogy of conversations that we've had. Carl, I want to be respectful of your time because I know it's getting to the 2 a.m. mark where you are now. Where can people pick up the book, and where can people also keep up with the work that you're doing?
Well, the best place to go is my website because everything is there. So that's carlpullein.com. Everything's there, my YouTube channel, my blog, the book, of course, and everything that I do, it's all there on my website. So I'd say go to carlpullein.com. You'll find something that will help you.
The book is Your Time, Your Way. Carl, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today for a productive conversation.
It's been a pleasure, Mike.
All right, so the recording's done. We're still in the live stream here. Thanks to everybody that was in the live stream asking questions. We've got Michael saying naps are awesome. The idea of school, and Janet mentioned something. She has a rebel issue where as soon as I put something on my calendar, I don't want to do it. Interesting. So that's, by the way, the rebel part is, for those that don't know, I think it's alluding to the Gretchen Rubin, like 4 tendencies framework where there's the rebel. I could tell you, and then Carl, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Really quickly, is if you're looking at that from the Gretchen Rubin framework, and if you're not, I would look at it, because if you're using the term rebel, then that's one of the tendencies. What you can do is take the rebel stuff and apply what we call the upholder tendency to it. So like being a upholder, and that would be, if you put something on your calendar that as soon as you put it on your calendar, you're not going to do it. It would be, I would say make it something that is attractive, where you then look, the pattern needs to be the calendar informs you, like it's the directory, and then the to-do list is the details. So don't look at the calendar as like, oh no, this is exactly what I have to do. It's like, I don't know what's inside this box here. I know that the box exists, so let's go and look what's in the box for today or beyond. And then Todoist gives you the details, because then, to your point, I mean, Carl, I'm sure when you do that, yes, you have the ones that are for today, but you may, like you said, you probably cherry pick to a degree too for those blocks as needed, right? Yeah.
But one of the things is that sometimes I've got that resistance, and it could be for a number of reasons. It's usually mood. It's usually motivated by some kind of emotion. But
Mm-hmm.
what I notice is I'm going to cherry pick the easy ones just to get started, and that usually
Yeah.
settles things down. Say, oh, I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to finish it. But actually, a good point on this one, I should say about this resisting what you've got on your calendar. Often, I find that's because people are doing what we always used to do with meetings, which was naturally apply a 1 hour.
Yeah.
Now, if I and the analogy I give with this is like if I wanted to go out for a run, but I'm not really a runner, and I'm saying I'm going for a run for an hour today, I'm not going to do it. But if I reduce, what we do as runners is we say, okay, I'm going to go 10 minutes down the road, and then I can turn around and come back. Well, actually, what you've done now is 20 minutes run because you actually went out 10 and you're going to come back 10. And what I usually say to people is start small. You know, if it's like, I mean, I think I have a block somewhere is on a Saturday, which is like household chores. It's just chores. That's all that's on my calendar. And it's, you know, I look at that some days and I just go, oh no. But what I'll do is, even though it's blocked as an hour, I'll just say, okay, I'm just going to do 30 minutes. I know what needs to be done. I take the laundry down and do all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to do 30 minutes and that's enough. And it's never, I always end up going nearly pretty much to the full hour. So
Well,
it's
that's
tricking the brain. Your brain
yeah.
is working against you. It says, I don't want to do an hour. Okay, do 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it usually gets you started and you probably do an hour anyway.
Well, and I was actually going to ask you during the recording, but I'll ask you really quickly here is how do you avoid Parkinson's law in the situation where, let's say you've got 2 hours that you've set up or 1 hour, let's use the 1 hour example, that you don't, because this is the problem with Parkinson's law, right? The idea that it will, the tasks will expand to fit the time allowed. If you get it done in 30 minutes, the nice thing about this, and I'm sure maybe I'm answering the question for you, but the nice thing is if you have a tool like Todoist, which is kind of like the place where all of the tasks go, and then the paper is kind of where you refine it a bit. There are always going to be things that you can put in that bucket if you decide to. At least they're intentional, right? Like as opposed to, okay, I'm done now. Well, let's just go and fiddle around on social media, or let's do something different. Or I'm done early. Like, so again, you can do a bunch of things, but how do you avoid the perils of Parkinson's law when you get that
one,
stuff done?
well, and that's the way, pretty much you actually almost got it there is I will say, hey, I've got this hour, but if I can do this in 30 minutes, that's giving me 30 minutes to play on social media,
Okay.
to read some newspaper. I just give myself permission to do whatever I want.
Gotcha.
Now, sometimes you're right. Sometimes I'm thinking, no, I'm in the mood to work. I'll go and pick something else to do. It's rare, but
Yeah.
it does happen sometimes. And
Mhm.
there has been some times where, you know, I've got scheduled tomorrow, like write podcast script, for example. And there are times when I'm on a Wednesday night, I'm thinking, bored. I'm not going to start the podcast script. And I look at it and I'm going, whoa, I've written, you know, like 75% of it. I've only got 25%. That's a result because that's giving me time back tomorrow. That again, I should point out is rare, but it
Yeah.
does happen occasionally. So I tend to avoid the Parkinson's law, you know, time expanding to the work available, or is it work expanding to the time available?
Yeah.
What I do there is I always in my mind say, if I finish this early, I can go and play on social media. I can go and watch, you know, YouTube video, whatever I want to do, because I've just saved myself some time.
Really quickly, what do you say to those people who are night owls out there right now that are watching this that are like, how do you function? Like, how do you, especially the ones that are like, I read Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. Miracle or 5 a.m. Club. I read The Miracle Morning. I should become a morning person because morning people are more productive. What do you have to say to those people right now that are either challenged by that or are even thinking about doing that, which I mean is a challenge in and of itself?
Well, I should say, I mean, I did actually do the 5 a.m. club properly for 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it is brilliant. I mean, 5 a.m. is a great time to do work. My problem is that I ended up having coaching calls that often finished at midnight. And I was saying, okay, by the time I've wound down and got into bed, it's like 1 a.m. and now I'm only getting 4 hours sleep. It's not sustainable. So I thought, okay. And then going back to in my 20s, I was thinking, well, you know, given the option, I would always stay in bed. And I
Yeah.
realized, I think eventually that, and there's another thing that I realized also was that I come into like another zone around 10 p.m. Certainly 10
Mm-hmm.
p.m. to midnight is a 2 hour zone there where I know I can be very creative. So it was kind of like a little voice was saying, you know what, you know, waking up at 5 a.m. is nice, but it's probably not for you because of the hours that you're working. And so I just adjusted it. But, you know, I know I've seen and heard enough people who, I mean, I can't remember. There's a great book out there called Daily Rituals. I've forgotten who it's
Yep,
by.
Mason Curry. Mason Curry.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely brilliant book. And you read that, and it's probably 50% of them are night owls and 50% of them are morning people. You know,
Yep.
it's not true to say that all productive people wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, because there's just as many productive people who are working late at night. So it's just a fallacy. It's not true.
Yeah, agreed. Hey, Carl, thanks so much for taking the time today. We're going to wrap up the stream now. Let Carl get some sleep so he can sleep in tomorrow for him. Thanks to everybody who has joined us live from the Time Crafting Trust Premium community. And again, thanks to those of you that are watching it after the fact. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, and that way you can check everything in the description below, as well as you can pick up Carl's book that way as well. So thanks, Carl, for joining me. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to the next time.
Thank you, Mike. Great talking to you.